Don't check the day of the week. It really is Monday, and I am here. Welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Chuck Todd. It is Election Eve as we prepare for one of the more consequential and perhaps unpredictable midterm elections in our lifetime in an uneasy political climate. At stake is control of Congress, the balance of power in state houses across America, and in a lot of ways the future course of our struggling democracy. So here's where we stand. Just hours away from the first polls opening tomorrow morning. Democrats control the Senate right now, with the upper chamber evenly divided 50-50, with Vice President Harris being the tie-breaking vote. On the House side, Democrats right now hold a very slim majority, as you can see there. Single-digit seats, essentially a 5-seat majority when you count all the vacancies. So Republicans need to just flip one seat to win control of the Senate and 5 seats to win control of the House. For context, Donald Trump lost 40 House seats in the midterms after his 2016 victory. Barack Obama lost 63 House seats in his first midterm as president. So the pattern here is not great if you're President Biden. Democrats are bracing for a tough night. The question is how tough. There could be plenty of surprises in store. But there really are two big competing forces at play in these midterms, which is why all of the prognosticators and handicappers are being a little cautious here. Because if you're on one team, if you're on team fundamentals, which point to a huge night for Republicans, then that's why you think Republicans are going to do a clean sweep. If you're on team polarization, well, in this case, it could give Democrats a fighting chance. And if you look at our final NBC News poll before the midterms conducted in the final days of this campaign, you can see evidence that the night could play out with the wind blowing in either team fundamentals direction or team polarization. So let's start with the fundamentals here. This is why so many folks think, hey, in a pre-Trump environment, everybody would be saying Republican way. Look at the right track, wrong track here. This is a 51-point gap, largest gap between right track and wrong track that we've recorded since '92. Just keep that in mind. How about the president's job rating? It sits at 44%, 2 points lower than Trump in 18, 1 point lower than Obama in 10. Just worth noting, both of them had big losses. And by the way, his approval rating with independents is below 30. It's the lowest we've ever recorded. So Democrats have come home for President Biden, but the middle-of-the-road voter, the independent voter, has not come home. And speaking of fundamentals, what kind of message do you want to send to the president? What should he take away from this? And they would like to see Biden make a great deal of change after these midterms. That's a big deal. Put these two together, you have 66% of Americans, 2/3 of Americans that are hoping that President Biden will make quite a bit of change based on these midterms. That's the highest number we recorded since '92. And then look at this number. The top issue on voters' minds is the economy. Just 19% say they're satisfied. 81% say they're dissatisfied. Only time that number was higher since I've been here is 2010. All of these numbers spell major trouble for the Democrats. If this is an election about the fundamentals, this is why Republicans, some people think, could win 30 to 40 seats, pick up 3 to 5 Senate seats. But why do Democrats think they have a chance to at least make this a race? Number one, they've pulled even on interest in this election, 73-73. They came home late, but they came home. I'll give you another one. Look at this number. The congressional preference. Among likely voters, Democrats actually have a 1-point lead in our poll. After what was clearly a hole that the Democrats were in the final 3 weeks of October, a little bit of an inching comeback here in the final weekend. And then look at this. What's your biggest concern of the midterms? That Democrats keep control and don't make enough change, 45%, or that the Republicans take control and they make the wrong kind of change, 47%. Fact is, this is what gives Democrats a fighting chance here. Republicans, the one mistake they've made this cycle, unlike every other midterm where the out party made the huge comeback, this party didn't claim they were any different than they were in 2020. Democrats claimed they were different from 2016 to 2018. Republicans claimed they were different between 2008 and 2010. Not this version of the Republican Party. That's something that has been standing out there a little bit. And then, of course, there's this. President Biden is obviously not popular. His net positive rating is underwater by 8 percentage points. But look who's been the closing messenger for the Republicans over the last 48 hours. It's President Trump. And he is not popular at all. He's 20 points underwater. Does Donald Trump provide a turnout boost for the Democrats? Just something to keep in mind. So let's head to the campaign trail. We're going to go to a couple of states that could give us some early indications of what the night is going to look like nationally, and 2 states where it could take days, or in the case of Georgia, a month because of a runoff, to find out who won. So we'll go to Florida here. That's where we're going to find, oh, that is not the map I wanted for this one. We'll go to Florida over here, where we're going to find Kerry Sanders. He is where Marco Rubio and Ron DeSantis are campaigning together today. Jesse Kirsch is in Ohio, ahead of former President Trump's rally tonight for Senate candidate J.D. Vance. And Dasha Burns is on the ground for us in Pittsburgh. Also with us is Ellison Barber in Atlanta. But let's go to Florida, Kerry Sanders, and find out. Rubio was with Trump yesterday, and he's with DeSantis today. Kerry, what are you seeing?
Well, we see a large crowd that has gathered here. Of course, the candidates are barnstorming the state. As you know, this is a big state, many media markets, 2 time zones. And so Marco Rubio and Ron DeSantis are here trying to whip up support going into the final hours, really, of the campaign to get those energized who are a part of the Republican Party to show up. At the same time, you have the Democrats, which is former Governor Charlie Crist and Val Demings, who's running for U.S. Senate here, doing the same. In fact, they will be here in Orlando later today, tomorrow. We're on the I-4 corridor in a state that really ultimately we'll find out, has this state gone from a purple state to a red state, and I think that will probably be decided based on the numbers we see in this election, Chuck.
Kerry, really fast, you've been a Floridian, I dare I say longer than I have. Do you sense anything on the ground?
You know, I think really what I'm seeing is, and we'll see Ron DeSantis out here shortly, is that he isn't really running for governor, that he has the confidence that he's going to win re-election here against Charlie Crist, that he's really running for president, and that's, even though it's unannounced, that's really what this is all about right now. We'll probably see him out here in a couple minutes. When we take a look at the numbers in terms of mail-in ballots, I think one of the things that's interesting in those mail-in ballots is that the Democrats who don't appear to be energized, because 44% of the ballots that were sent out to Democrats in the state have not been returned yet. Compare that to the Republicans, which I think is about 28% that have not been returned. So, you know, if they went in the mail yesterday or today, there's got a short window to get those ballots in, Chuck.
Kerry, you're bringing something up. I'm very curious to see whether you're going to see a decent Democratic turnout in Texas, Florida, California, places where the top of the ticket races look like they're done deals. Fascinated to see on that. Kerry Sanders in Florida for us with DeSantis and Rubio. Sure. Kerry, thank you. Let's move over to Ohio. That's where we find Jesse Kirsch. Boy, 3 weeks ago, Vance, and Ryan was the talk of Washington, the talk of Senate prognosticators. The last 3 weeks feel like has been a slow sort of move toward Vance. But you tell me, Jesse, what do you see?
Well, I can tell you, Chuck, that we've heard both of these candidates at various points throughout the campaign brushing aside the polling here in Ohio, and specifically what you're referring to there is seeming to look like things are pulling away for J.D. Vance. I asked Tim Ryan about this over the weekend, and he said that when he is out meeting with people, specifically in Republican-leaning areas, he says what he is feeling is not lining up with the polls. But obviously, that's coming from someone who's trying to keep this race going. So take that with however big a grain of salt you want. In this final push, though, we are looking at former President Donald Trump on the trail on election eve here in Ohio with J.D. Vance. He was with the Republican nominee a few months back as well in September. And obviously that rally led to one of the more memorable lines of this election face-off that Ryan has tried to paint Vance as someone who will do whatever former President Donald Trump wants, which is exactly how Vance wants Ryan to be seen in terms of doing whatever President Biden and Nancy Pelosi want in Congress. And that is specifically what Ryan is trying to avoid. He wouldn't be upset if you thought he was a Republican. And in fact, we've talked with people throughout this campaign, Chuck, who have mistakenly thought he was the Republican nominee. Even J.D. Vance, in an interview with our Henry Gomez, said that he has had to explain that Ryan is not a Republican. And that's what Vance has spent a lot of time trying to do, is talk about the Tim Ryan on the trail versus the Tim Ryan who votes in Congress. And Congressman Ryan really had a lead over the summer in terms of momentum because he was advertising, and Vance had to play catch-up this fall. He got an infusion of cash from national Republicans, which has certainly helped with his messaging. And
right.
Ryan, I know when I talked to him the other day, said that he feels that the National Democratic Party possibly missed an opportunity here by not helping push him over the finish line when he was controlling that messaging so much over the summer, Chuck.
There's no doubt a lot of mistakes made in August and September nationally by the Democratic Party up and down the ballot. Ohio, a glaring example there. Jesse Kirsch in Ohio for us. Jesse, thank you. All right, let's head over to Pennsylvania. Dasha Burns, she's on the west part of the state today in Pittsburgh. And Dasha, look, the cliche of it's turnout is there for a reason. And in Pennsylvania, it's that and then some.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And right now I am at the Pennsylvania Democrats headquarters here in Pittsburgh all day. Canvassers have been coming in and out of here, volunteers coming to pick up campaign signs, to get training, to go out knocking on doors. And Chuck, our NBC News poll, our final poll, showed that about 2/3 of voters had made up their minds by Labor Day. So the last couple of months have really been about that last third. And at this point, you can imagine that slice is even smaller. But because this race is so tight, all of those undecideds are going to matter. The folks that are really, really going to matter right now, though, for the canvassers here today are the folks that are undecided about whether or not they're going to vote. So the people that have been going out, hitting the pavement, that trying to convince those Democrats that are maybe a little bit less enthusiastic to go out to cast their ballots. And over the weekend, Biden, Obama here stumping for Fetterman, and for Josh Shapiro, the gubernatorial candidate, trying to raise that enthusiasm. And Chuck, you talked at the outset of the show about fundamentals versus polarization. Well, I would say that definitely over the weekend for those big name Democrats here, it was team polarization, talking about big picture, the stakes for democracy, the climate of our politics, hoping that that will get voters out. Chuck.
It's fascinating, this back-to-back states here, Ohio and Pennsylvania. Polarization is the ally of the Democrats in Pennsylvania. Polarization is the ally of the Republicans in Ohio. It's just a reminder, polarization cuts both ways. If indeed that is the type of electorate we see tomorrow night. Dasha Burns in Pennsylvania for us. Dasha, thank you. And let's close in Georgia. And one of the themes we have of all four of these states is, unlike Arizona, Nevada, and a few other states, and Michigan maybe, these are states we expect to at least know where they're going to be by, say, 3 or 4 in the morning. And with Georgia, the question is whether we're going to know we're going to a runoff or whether one of these two candidates can somehow get to 50%. I'll tell you this, Allison, based on all of the last-second ads I'm seeing from Warnock, I'm starting to believe the Republican hype that Walker might be able to get to 50. What are you hearing on the ground, Allison?
You know, this is a very intense race. As we've gotten closer and closer to Election Day, things just feel like they've gotten messier, a lot more personal. Both candidates right now in this race are arguing that the other person is ill-equipped for the job of a United States senator. You look at the polling here, and this race really cannot get much tighter. What we're seeing the candidates do right now, which we see every election, but here it feels even more important, is aggressively pushing turnout, telling everyone at different events, if you haven't voted, if you have voted, make sure everyone you possibly know that they vote as well. Because in Georgia, you can't just win with just winning. You have to have a majority of the vote, right? You have to pass the 50% threshold. And something that could be a factor here are split ticket voters. In an AJC poll, there were about 10% of Republican leading voters who said that they were going to vote for Republican incumbent Governor Brian Kemp in the gubernatorial race, but then split their ticket and either vote for Warnock in the Senate race or vote for the Libertarian candidate. That could potentially be a factor come Election Day. But what we are seeing these two candidates do in the final days is aggressively just try to drill home their message. For Walker, it has been hyper-focused on the economy. He says that a vote for Warnock is a vote for President Joe Biden. And he says, hey, look at the economy. They're not doing a good job. Warnock, he says this is bigger than left or right, Republican or Democrat. He says this is really about right or wrong. He says that character matters here. And he's hoping that Georgia voters of all political stripes, or at least enough, will see that and cast their ballot for him. But I mean, as you said, this is so incredibly close. It's hard to really even make a prediction. The big question here is, will we even know who has won this race on Tuesday night?
Allison, are you seeing much evidence of Kemp trying now to help Walker, or is he staying away or staying out of the Senate race?
I mean, he seems to be staying completely out of it. It's interesting when you look at who has been on the campaign trail with both of the Senate candidates. Senator Warnock, he did not have President Biden come down to campaign with him. He did have former President Obama come, but you look at Walker, he did not have former President Donald Trump come. He has not really done any events that I can remember with Kemp. Tonight, he has a rally that is about an hour after Kemp's rally further down the road. His campaign has pushed back on the notion somehow that Georgia Republicans are divided, saying, no, it's an hour apart. But just from looking at who he's been campaigning with, he's not campaigning with Kemp. He's not campaigning with former President Trump. He's having some of the big, right-wing heavy hitters nationally come down, like Senator Lindsey Graham, but not a lot of other Georgia Republicans.
I only ask because we start out with Rubio and DeSantis campaigning together there at the end. We've not had that moment of Kemp and Walker doing something similar in Georgia. Fair enough, Ellison? Interesting. Something else to keep an eye on, because some people think Kemp can get a big enough number to drag Walker over the finish line. But if they're not campaigning together, does it have the same impact? Ellison, thank you. And before that, Carrie, Jesse, and Dasha, thank you all for getting us started. Coming up, concerns of potential violence echoing on the campaign trail. Our new NBC poll showed who Americans are blaming for this rising threat of political violence and dangerous rhetoric. That's next. And an important programming note, I will, of course, be here for our special Election Day edition of Meet the Press Now. We'll have the first wave of exit polling just after 5 p.m. on Hallie Jackson Now. And then the official special coverage kicks off at 6 p.m. with Tom Yamitz and Hallie Jackson right here on NBC News Now. And the entire team is going to be together at 8 p.m., both here on News Now and NBC The Network. We're simulcasting both. We'll be right back. We are back. The threat of political violence is looming large over these midterms. It's the first national election since the January 6th attack on the Capitol. It comes just days after Speaker Pelosi's husband, Paul, was released from the hospital after being attacked about 10 days ago. And just this weekend, the FBI and Phoenix police responded to reports of a white powder substance in envelopes sent to the office of the Arizona Republican nominee, Kari Lake. Source told NBC News that one campaign staffer was exposed to the material. Police have not yet been able to verify what the substance is or even if it's dangerous. In our latest NBC poll, we asked voters who or what they think bears responsibility for this rise of political violence and the rhetoric behind it. Their answer? Well, pretty much everyone. Nearly all Americans, 93%, and this was across the board, blame social media. That was number one with a bullet. As extreme and violent rhetoric spreads online, and that number is bipartisan. 87% blame cable news media for what it's worth. Nearly 3/4, 72% blame former President Trump. 71% blame Republican candidates and lawmakers. 67% of people blame Democratic candidates and lawmakers. 59% put responsibility on President Biden. I'm joined now by a former Republican governor of North Carolina, Pat McCrory, and Patrick Gaspard. He's president and CEO of the Center for American Progress, and he was President Obama's first political director. Pat and Patrick. All right. I got to make sure I get this right. And don't respond to Patrick.
So at least our moms agreed on something.
That's right.
That's right.
Pat, you would talk to me when I asked about the violence question. Look, when you're in the arena, in some cases, you expect the threats, but you don't actually expect the violence. The threats are sort of sadly come with the territory, whether you're mayor, governor, that happens. But to see it actually acted out was something else on Pelosi.
Yeah, I take this violence directed toward any elected official or a member of their family personally, because it's happened to me. And it's had a big impact on me and my family. So when people are at my house, or people attack me in restaurants, or people physically attack my car, which occurred after I left the governor's office, in the middle of an interchange, someone recognized me, and next thing I know, my car is being attacked. It shakes you up. It really shakes you up. I got attacked in downtown Washington during the Trump inauguration. I was chased by 15 to 20 demonstrators. There's Pat McCrory. Let's go get him. And when it's covered, some people laugh at it. And I kind of laugh it off. But
well, you laugh at it until it happens to you, right, Patrick?
Exactly.
I mean, that's the thing in all of this. I mean, look, I was numb to it until it happened. Until it happened.
Well, but it's an attack on our democracy.
Well, but Governor, we laugh at it until it happens to you. But,
yes.
But apparently, some leading Republicans are still laughing at it happening to Paul Pelosi. It's been shocking to see the responses from the governor of Virginia.
I don't get this. How did this? I get why it happened, and I think social media has a huge amount to it.
It does.
The lack of bipartisan condemnation. We didn't have that with Scalise. We didn't have that with Kathy Gifford. Something's changed.
There's something that has contaminated a major political party, and you know I think Donald Trump is a big significant factor, and they saw the success that he had mocking disabled reporters, personally attacking the candidates that he ran against them, and that seems to be in the blood now. We saw Ted Cruz mocking a stroke victim a few days ago. So there is that thing here that the American public is right has metastasized on social media, and I hope on the other side of this election, Republicans in Congress and Democrats in Congress will come together, lift up some kind of committee on this, and we'll see some real action from DHS and DOJ around this.
Well, I agree with that survey. It's everybody, and I think Trump escalated it, but it was occurring before Trump. I've been in this business since 32 years of age, running for city council, and I've seen it continually escalating. And part of it's, let me talk about the politicians who are trying to get out the vote this week. They're, like what I said on Meet the Press Sunday, it's all about passion, not about content. They're not giving any details on what they're going to do on the issues. They're talking, we're going to fight for you. You know, when you say you're going to fight for you, that is the biggest bunch of bull. No politician fights. But
you've never used that rhetoric in a campaign?
Well, you probably have.
Absolutely. And I quit doing it because I go, you know what? First of all, it's not right. And second, people take you literally. And we saw that on January the 6th.
Right. It's look, at the end of the day, it's this 5%.
Yes.
Right. We do know. I do buy the idea that, like, you know, and 95% of people understand it's rhetoric and that's what politics is about. The problem is the 5% that don't.
The American public said that it's overwhelmingly social media, and now we have richest man in the world purchasing Twitter and kind of exhorting people towards more of this kind of mockery of the violence with the kind of tweets that he put out about Paul Pelosi. We have a serious regulatory problem here that's got to be addressed by both parties.
There's nothing funny about violence, because every form of violence against a police officer, against a teacher, against a judge is anarchy.
Well, if you're committing violence in the name of democracy, you don't believe in it.
Absolutely.
Sorry, because the whole point of politics, I'll be honest, like, if you don't have democracy, I understand violent reactions. But if you have it and you're being violent, you're attacking it.
You're attacking the system, which is anarchy.
But politicians respond to polls. We saw in your latest poll, Chuck, it demonstrates that the American people are seeing this now as like one of the most significant threats that we're faced with. So I suspect there's going to be some...
It was interesting, you know, when we put this question on, I want to put up our word cloud of what voters, we asked them to tell us a message you want to send with your vote. What was interesting, and this might actually make us all feel a tiny bit better, is that end partisanship. And we have this done by party. 3 weeks ago, Republicans weren't ready to talk about ending partisanship or toning down the rhetoric. But they were in this, Pat. And I get the sense that the Pelosi thing, while it didn't get the coverage I think we all think it should have, the public, they didn't like it, and they want it. There's something about this, they turned it down. I
want to believe that.
I know.
It's like people come up to me and go, McCrory, why do politicians do negative ads and all these? And I go, because they work. And the ads now, they're in black and white, and they are a bad picture of your opponent, and they're evil. And people go, I hate them.
But beyond the violence, Governor, it's pretty clear that people do want to see the logjam broken up in Washington, D.C. They want to see people working together on economic advancement, on inflation, certainly things like the Infrastructure Act passed in a bipartisan fashion by President Biden has overwhelming approval, particularly because folks are concerned about the polarization.
All right, let's talk about what you guys also have done for your whole life for a living, which is sort of figure out American politics. Are you on team fundamentals, team polarization? Patrick, meaning this. I think we have two competing narratives here, right? If the fundamentals are at stake here and the voters are reacting in sort of the pre-Trump era, it's going to be a Republican wave and a Democratic wipeout. But if polarization is as strong as we think it is, then you're going to see incremental movements. Patrick, what say you?
No, we're very much in a kind of 50-50 environment in our politics. In 2016, something happened that had never happened before, which is you didn't have a single person winning a Senate seat in a state that was not won by the same presidential candidate.
Your team polarization.
Yeah, absolutely. And then in 2020, you saw a repeat of that, with the exception, I think, of college. So we are locked in to our separate camps. It's a cultural cleavage. It's a geographical cleavage. And most of these contests, which Republicans should have been able to run away with, given the environmental challenges, are dead even. I just came back from Georgia. 50-50 right now in the governor's race and in the Senate race at the margins, and everything's going to hang on youth turnout. So I'm with Team Polarization.
But the dilemma with the politics.
You think a wave's developing in North Carolina?
I think
you
there's a wave, but it may be a small percentage, but it'll feel like a wave across the nation. But the problem,
it doesn't take much to change the margins.
See, when Biden won, or if the Republicans win, the dilemma with both parties is they win and they take it as a mandate. And these elections are not mandates.
Well, the voters aren't. They don't want to. They're not sending a mandate message.
I know, but
they're
I'm
not.
saying,
here's the rub.
Assume it's a mandate.
Here's the rub. If you know that you're in a 50-50 environment, and it's not likely that you're going to have dominant majorities, and you also know that you're likely going to flip in the next election, you double down and you do everything that you possibly can to pass the things that are of priority for you and your constituents.
You're talking logic now.
Well, no, it's actually what happens. It's actually what happens. When Donald Trump had his majority, singular focus on what? The tax cut that accrued to the benefit of the richest Americans. Biden doubles down on infrastructure, on the Inflation Reduction Act, because you have that window. You got to get something done on climate because you know that Republicans are coming in. There's the conversation.
Pat, I've been working on sort of like, I always think about these elections. Okay, here are the different scenarios. Can I explain this one? Can I explain this one? Can I explain this one? One scenario I'm curious, if Republicans end up a bit disappointed. They don't get what they thought they were going to get. They come up short in the Senate, and they only get 15 House seats. They'll get their majority in the House. But I will put the blame at the fact that they didn't offer anything new. You know, normally, the reason the out party... Look at Democrats in 2018. They said, we're not Hillary Clinton. We're this party. We're focused on this. 2010, we're not George W. Bush. Right? We're a new Republican Party. There was no new Republican Party this cycle. You tried to be one, and you lost.
It's too risky now.
Interesting.
You propose something new, you give the other side something to attack. Like if someone was honest about the deficit and said, I need to do this to Social Security.
You know,
you're dead.
Governor, I don't know. It's interesting, Governor. I don't know that I'm hearing like a fear from Republican candidates of being attacked from Democrats. I think there's a fear of being attacked by Donald Trump. You can't propose anything new in the Republican Party right now because you can't say we are pivoting from Donald Trump and manage to survive primaries. You had that experience in North Carolina, and right now you have DeSantis who can't even take a shot back at Trump for fear of that base.
You have.
So I think
if I were Republican right now,
I would
hide between now and Tuesday and just let the natural dynamics of the economy and everything and work for you and stay the heck out of the way.
You know,
is that good for democracy? No. Is it good to win elections?
It sounds like, as I found out, you sound like you're describing Brian Kemp's campaign who said, I'm not getting anywhere near Herschel Walker because he's about to win in a nice, comfortable way versus... I don't know if I want to get stained by the whole Trump era.
Well, I'm not buying that Kemp is in a nice, comfortable way. I just was down there. I think that you're going to have a runoff in the governor's race as well.
I will never underestimate the Stacey Abrams machine. And I'm not.
I'll tell you where the real battle is going to be. It's already started. The real battle's within each parties.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to be Trump against DeSantis, against the 20 other people who want to be president. It's going to be against McConnell and some other senators.
I agree with that.
It's going to be against who's going to replace Pelosi, maybe Schumer.
Yeah, but I think that Democrats have demonstrated in this last Congress that they can kind of find the center within their party to get things done.
Patrick. We'll see if I buy that. I don't know. I'm with Pat on this one. I think we're about to see some big fights. Big fights. Pat McCrory, Patrick Gaspard. You guys showed how to do this with a smile. Thank you. Up next, we're headed west. Why Nevada could be the epicenter of an earthquake for the Democrats, and they could be feeling the shockwaves in California as well. Will there be a decent Democratic turnout in California? It's a big question that a lot of Southern California House members on the Democratic side of the aisle would like to know. But before we go to break, in the final hours before Election Day, here's what voters in some key states are telling our NBC News reporters about what matters most to them.
Market, inflation, all those things. I mean, how it affects your future.
Abortion is high on my list. Gun control is very high on my list.
Inflation, just all the policies and the changes.
The issue of abortion
you have your rights.
Our economy's not doing well. We're almost in a downturn.
A women's right to choose. I'm also really concerned about what's going on in the Supreme Court.
Immigration would be, obviously now inflation's a new one.
Obviously, crime, it's terrible. It's horrible.
I'm married to my wife legally, and they want to take that away. That's the number one thing that got me.
Abortion, firearms.
The main thing is that we vote for people that are willing to accept the results of the ballot.
Welcome back. One of the key states we're going to be watching tomorrow is Nevada. Question is, how long are we going to be watching it? Is it going to be as long as we waited in 2020? It's a state with a pair of vulnerable statewide Democratic incumbents, Senator Catherine Cortez Masto and Governor Steve Sisolak. It's also a state where the issue of the economy could loom large because, as I like to say, when the national economy gets a cold, Nevada gets the flu. The state's unemployment rate in September was nearly a full point higher than the national average. The unemployment rate ticks up to 5% in the Las Vegas area. And inflation, which of course is a huge issue, is pretty much rattling Nevada. Just look at gas prices in the state. They're among the highest in the nation, more than $1 above the national average, according to AAA. And then you throw in redistricting, where the Democrats arguably got a little bit greedy and may have, in an attempt to shore up, or some districts may have actually made everybody a bit more vulnerable in the Las Vegas area. So let's break all this down. I'm joined by the expert on all things Nevada, and it is the Nevada Independent CEO, John Ralston. All right, John, you've got so many people buzzing already about your predictions. You're like, Catherine Cortez Masto can hang on. The implication is Sisolak cannot. And I think you expect 2 of the 3 Democratic House incumbents to survive. Show your work. Tell me why.
Well, Chuck, I wish you hadn't brought these up, but now that I have to defend them, because this was a very difficult year, as you know, and the voting patterns in Nevada are very, very strange. But listen, the difference between Catherine Cortez Masto and Steve Sisolak, let's talk about the governor first, and that goes to everything that you just pointed out about Nevada. And I wouldn't say the cold flu analogy is right. I'd say it's cold pneumonia. Right? I mean, you have one trick pony economy here still, right, Chuck? You shut down the Las Vegas Strip, you crush the economy. The governor did that at the beginning of the pandemic, and he closed what he called non-essential businesses, and he's still suffering from that COVID hangover, as is the economy, even though, despite the numbers you put up, we've come back. I am just not sure when he is running against a guy who looks like a governor, the sheriff of Clark County, which, as you know, Chuck, is where all the Democratic votes are. If he can hold his own in Clark County, I think it's very difficult for the governor to survive. And Joe Lombardo, the sheriff of Clark County, is a much better candidate than Adam Laxalt, who was running against Catherine Cortez Masto, who was a very disciplined candidate who has run a really good campaign. That's about as much of my work as I can show you, Chuck.
Well, my skepticism on split tickets this year is due to polarization, that everybody's going home to their camps, and I'm seeing it in a whole bunch of other states. So the idea that there's a little bit of gap here somehow between Sisolak and Cortez Masto, I'm asking you, who is that voter? Is it a Clark County independent who likes Lombardo but just doesn't like Laxalt? Is that the pattern here?
Well, I think you've hit on it in the sense that, as you know, Chuck, there's been an explosion of non-major party voters here, and they're going to determine the election. There are going to be a few 100,000 of them voting in this election, and even the internal polling for the Republicans shows that there are Lombardo, Cortez Masto voters in Clark County. And so I think for everyone watching these elections, the first numbers that will pop up on election night will be the Clark County numbers, which is a huge part of the vote. A lot of early vote mail ballots will have been cast. And if those Democrats do not have a sizable lead, by the way, by sizable, I mean more than 8 points, then both of those races are going to be very, very close.
All right, we've been living in Clark. Let's go to Reno and Washoe. What can you tell me? Are they the decider this year? Is Washoe the true decider, not the Clark County firewall?
Yeah, it might be true, Chuck. It's interesting what's happened in Washoe County. As you know, last two cycles, Washoe, back in the old days, Chuck, when both of us were a lot younger, was a reliably red county. That's Paul Laxalt territory. But the Democrats have slowly eroded that. And the last two cycles, including the last midterm, Jackie Rosen, who's now a U.S. Senator, and Steve Sisolak, who's now the governor, both Democrats, they won Washoe County. The Democrats are doing pretty well in Washoe County in the early vote, and they believe that Steve Sisolak and Catherine Cortez Masto can win Washoe County. That's how they hang on.
I'm curious, do you think now Washoe is basically you can't win without winning Washoe?
I think if you're a Democrat running statewide and you have to endure the rural landslides that have been occurring in the last few cycles. Now, you can't, that doesn't offset the Clark County vote necessarily, but in a lower turnout year like a midterm, it could. And so if you're a Democrat and you lose Washoe County by a few points, Chuck, there's just no margin for error, which is why he said you got to watch that Clark County number when it comes up on election night. Anything less than double digits, it's going to be a close race. Biden is the first statewide Democrat in a major race in a long time to be under 10 points and still pull it out.
John Ralston, I have a feeling that it's going to be a long week, not just a long night for you. We'll be turning to you a lot to try to unpack what's going on as the vote count comes in. It's always good. The state of Nevada is lucky to have you as a resource. John, thank you. Let me stay out west. I want to turn now to California. Republicans could end up seeing their night turn from good to great, depending on what happens in California. Our NBC News political unit, we isolated 13 congressional districts that President Biden won by 10 or more points in 2020, where the main House Republican PAC has been spending money in the last month. If we're in for a red wave, it will be through these congressional districts, and 5 of them are in the state of California, including California 47. That's where Katie Porter is facing a tough re-election after her district that includes parts of Orange County was redrawn. And despite raising a vast amount of money and still sitting on some money, the Cook Political Report moved her race against Scott Baugh from lean Democrat to a pure toss-up. Let's tell you about California 49. It's also another Orange County district where last week President Biden actually campaigned there for Congressman Mike Levin. Levin is also facing a tough election in a rematch against Republican candidate Brian Marriott. Levin's district has also shifted to become a toss-up race, despite being a seat that Biden carried by 11 points. Look, we're also watching a few other Democratic-held seats here. This is a district Democrats should carry. It's a little farther in the Central Valley. The Central Valley districts is David Valadao. This is the Republican-held district. Remember, he voted to impeach Donald Trump. He's in a district that Biden did well in, so this is one we've been keeping an eye on as well. But I want to bring in Melanie Mason. She's the national political correspondent at the LA Times. And Melanie, I want to start with this, and I'm also going to ask you about another member of Congress who's not running for Congress, but running for mayor of LA, because all of this seems to translate into what I think is the Democratic Party's biggest problem tomorrow night in the state of California, and that's going to be Democratic turnout. What are you hearing? What say you?
I mean, I think that Democrats out here are nervous, and I understand why, because we're watching the early vote returns so far, and Democratic mail ballots, they are ahead, but not to necessarily an extent that I think that Democrats would like if we see a huge Republican turnout tomorrow. Now, there's one X factor that I think is interesting that I just want to point out. It's kind of raining here in LA, and it's really going to be raining tomorrow. And so if we have this huge shift where Republicans have been waiting until Election Day to show up to the polls, as a native Angelino, I can say we don't do weather very well. And so I'm actually going to be very interested to see if the weather impacts how much people want to come out to vote. That might actually bail out some Democrats whose mail turnout has been unimpressive so far.
I was just going to say, Melanie, let's rain in L.A. is like snow for Washington, D.C., right?
Yes, and we need it. Don't get me wrong, but we're also not very good at driving in it.
Yeah, so I want to turn to the mayor's race, because I had an operative tell me about 6 months ago, Karen Bass is going to be fine as long as there's not a Republican wave. Well, here we are. What's that race breaking down like?
This mayor's race has been so interesting because, man, the narrative shifts have been gone so back and forth. Remember, during the primary, Rick Caruso looked like the front runner. In fact, on election night, he had a sizable lead, and L.A. County counting its votes slowly, methodically. Eventually, Karen Bass ended up being the primary winner by quite a lot. So most of the narrative in the general election has been Rick Caruso as the underdog. Of course, he's an underdog that is also a billionaire who has spent $100 million of his own money. And we have really seen a flood of Rick Caruso ads. And he's tapping into a lot of issues that I think are also maybe what's powering this Republican wave overall. Conversations about crime. Out here in L.A., it's homelessness, which I think stands in for just sort of the general feeling of things sort of out of control, which I think is what Republicans are trying to tap into nationally. So Caruso could certainly, Republican wave in L.A. feels a little bit contradictory. And to be clear, Caruso's running as a Democrat, even though he very recently registered in that party. But I think it does reflect the change in sort of philosophy or ideology, at least, those sentiments that are coming through.
Well, it's interesting, and I'd like to go down further. When we've had competitive L.A. mayor's races in the past, there's always a constituency group that's not represented in the race itself. In this case, it's the Latino population and the Asian population. How are the two campaigns courting both of those votes?
Well, I think that the X factor for that in particular is, remember, just a couple of weeks ago, we had those racist tapes leaked out of LA City Council that really laid bare the power struggles between Latino political power here in Los Angeles and Black political power here in Los Angeles. And I'm going to be very interested to see if the raw feelings that were dredged up by these tapes coming public impacts at all how the vote turns out. Karen Bass has been trying to emphasize the sort of coalition building between Black voters and Latino voters. She's been working on that for most of her career. But I do think that Caruso has really tried to tap in, particularly to the Latino vote. He actually, in one debate, emphasized his Latin heritage because he was there's an Italian background there, which might have been a bit of a stretch. But, there's a reason why he did that, is because he sees Latino voters as key. And I think cleaving Latino voters from Karen Bass's coalition might be the secret for him.
I believe Eric Garcetti tried that. I think he claimed heritage for 6 or 7 different things at one point. Very quickly, Gavin Newsom has been, to some Democrats, stubbornly neutral in the Bass-Caruso race here. Is there any blowback for him inside the party if Caruso wins?
It seems really odd, especially now that we've seen so many others in the Democratic Party line up behind Bass, right? I mean, you have President Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris, who's actually in Los Angeles right now rallying for Karen Bass, President Obama even. And so I think that really makes the stark difference with Newsom.
Melanie Mason of the LA Times giving us the skinny on what a big question mark for me will be is whether Democrats are going to turn out in a state that doesn't have a marquee statewide race that doesn't involve mobile sports gaming. Anyway, Melanie, thank you. We are back on the trail after a quick break. We're going to check in with where President Biden and former President Clinton are spending his final day on the campaign trail. Perhaps, more importantly, the places they are not going. Welcome back in the final days of the campaign. We're keeping a close eye on where the Democratic surrogates are and where they aren't going. It's a good way to actually find out what the party thinks is in trouble. Joe Biden followed up his visit to Deep Blue, New York yesterday with a virtual address to the DNC earlier this hour. Then he'll head to a campaign event for Maryland's gubernatorial candidate Wes Moore tonight. Meanwhile, former President Bill Clinton was in Texas today as Republicans try to make gains in the state's Rio Grande Valley. He was campaigning with Henry Cuellar, by the way, in case you're wondering. And in North Carolina, with a crucial Senate seat on the line, no major Democratic surrogate is in the state as Democrat Sherry Beasley and Republican Ted Budd made their closing arguments to voters. So let's check in on everybody. We got our White House correspondent Carol Lee with the president. Priscilla Thompson's in Laredo, Texas with the former president. Antonia Hilton has been on the ground for us in North Carolina, specifically in Raleigh. Carol, let me start with you. Wes Moore. Wes Moore is probably a star of the future of the party. He's going to be the next governor of Maryland. The party in some ways orchestrated that by picking his opponent in the Republican primary, a MAGA guy, an election denier. So what is tonight about then?
Look, the White House likes him, Chuck, and as you said, he's seen as somebody who's a star in the party. The irony is that his opponent was picked by Democrats and that he's part of that crop of Democrats who benefited from the Democrats spending money on the very thing that President Biden says is the big threat in this election, and that is democracy. So, and MAGA Republicans. So there's that hanging over this. But look, he's going there because he's going places where he's wanted. And this is a state where Democrats can flip from Republican to Democrat. That's not something that is going to be the common narrative tomorrow night. And so the president's welcome there. The White House likes more. And this is this place where he can, make his closing arguments, still get national media attention. And so far, what we've seen from the president, he did a couple of virtual DNC receptions just moments ago, and he's putting on this very positive face, putting his best face forward, saying he's optimistic they could hold on to the Senate and he may be even the House. Now, that's obviously not what most people think is going to happen, but he's trying, and he's now in this closing argument where it's really just about getting out the vote.
Joe Biden, happy warrior. We'll see if we see that version of Joe Biden tonight. Carol Lee, thank you. Let's move over to Priscilla Thompson, where a couple of old blue dog Democrats are hanging out with each other. Priscilla, we got Bill Clinton and Henry Cuellar. Whatever anybody in the base of the party may think of those two gentlemen, I'm not surprised to see them. That's the Democratic Party that was ascendant back in the 90s.
That's right. And we heard former President Clinton talking a lot about that on stage today and the work that Democrats have done in Congress and in Washington over the years. Henry Cuellar has been the congressman for this district for some 15 years. And so we heard Clinton talking about jobs and Biden's infrastructure bill and talking about inflation, saying that, yes, it is a challenge right now, but look at Europe. We are not in the situation that they are in. And so there is reason to hope. But Democrats aren't the only ones who are painting some sort of picture of hope here. Republicans are also very hopeful about their chances here in South Texas as they're working to pick up these 3 congressional seats here. We saw just a few weeks ago, former President Trump was in South Texas. Over the weekend, House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy and several other Republican leaders here. And nationally, Republicans have been investing a lot of money in these races. They really feel like they have a chance to pick up some of these seats. And when you look at the Cook Political Report ratings, you see why. Here in Texas 28, Henry Cuellar has a pretty good shot here. His race is listed as leaning Democrat. But when you look at the other 2 races, Texas 15 is a district that was redistricted, and it would have been one that Donald Trump would have won now. And that race has gone from leaning Republican to likely Republican. And then you look at Texas 34, which actually during redistricting got more Democratic seats, but has gone from lean Democrat to a toss-up. And so that is the state of play here as both Democrats and Republicans are making their case ahead of Election Day. Chuck?
It's going to be fascinating if Henry Cuellar is the only Democrat left in South Texas. Be very curious how the Democratic Party deals with that on the House side of things, that's for sure. Priscilla Thompson in Texas for us. Priscilla, thank you. And finally, let's hit Antonia Hilton in the state of North Carolina. Antonia, I'm not going to ask you whether we're going to see President Obama there. I think we know the answer here. Sherry Beasley's on her own. It is what it is. How's the get out the vote effort? It's all on them. Are they going to, how's it going?
It has been all on them, although according to her team, they've reached over 220,000 voters since just last Friday. And I actually got the chance to hear her speak about this this morning in a press gaggle. She said, look, she knew from the beginning of this campaign that it was going to be a North Carolina-centered campaign, basically signaling that she kind of knew she was going to be left in this position. And I think that's why you've seen her campaign take this unusual strategy that most Democrats in North Carolina don't take, where she's not just spending all her time trying to get her numbers up in the urban centers. She's investing a lot of time in rural communities. And I actually just got some data that I think if you were Sherry Beasley, you'd be quite happy to hear about. And Chuck, you'll appreciate, for example, out of Anson County, from our County to County series, right now, early voting data through November 6th shows that black voter turnout in that county is over 2% higher than white voter turnout. In Hoke County, black voter turnout is over 8% higher than white voter turnout. And in Robeson County, black voter turnout is 3% higher than white voter turnout. That's exactly what Sherry Beasley wants to hear, that in these rural communities where often people feel ignored, they sat on the sidelines, and data show that in 2020, they didn't show up in some cases to vote for Joe Biden or anybody else, that they are coming out for her. So this is the key to what she thinks is going to allow her to pull off an upset and surprise some people tomorrow night.
Well, Antonia, you are right. You have found the exact data. That's the whole point of why we went down there, spent all this time there. We're going to find out how much it will matter tomorrow night. Antonia, terrific reporting and terrific work, so thank you. And thank you all for being with us this hour. I'll be back tomorrow. We'll have our special Election Day edition of Meet the Press Now. And, of course, tomorrow we're going to be here for special coverage, breaking down the results as they come in. We'll start at 6 a.m. right here on NBC News Now. And we're not going to stop until at least we've called Pennsylvania. So who knows? Maybe Thursday, maybe Friday. NBC News Now coverage continues with Hallie Jackson after a quick break.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.